Hello, Marie. Welcome back to Moderation's 31 Days of Halloween. Yeah, we're 2/3 of the way done. Why do I keep doing this to myself every year?
'Cause the viewers like it. Even though you look like shit.
Thanks for stating the obvious, Ida. Sadly, that comes with turning out so many videos so quickly, as well as dealing with 4 different languages, little sleep, and mandatory overtime. It's enough to drive someone mad. Tell me about it. I'm surprised you haven't started talking to yourself yet. You stay out of this! Anyway, back on today's topic. 2 weeks ago, we looked at the first 100 pages of the webcomic Erma, and while that did fulfill our obligation we agreed on, but we've been asked by more of you to continue it, so here we are again. If you haven't seen our first video on the topic, I suggest you look at that before continuing. Last time we left off our little mute half-Onryu, setting up the events of our first main story arc, with the occasional filler being like Erma and Amy missing the ride, and having to take the midnight bus to school. But after that, we get our continuing background story, of her sickly watching their version of My Little Pony, Warrior Princess Pegasus. Selena starts catching on to this, and later asks her about it, teasing her with their version of the word brony. Erma freaks out and runs off. Selena, never meaning this to be anything more than a joke, looks for her wanting to apologize, searching everywhere that she can think of, until the dummy makes his move. Again, this character's been teased twice before, and you never really thought of him as that big of a threat until now. Erma runs off with her toys and thinks about burning them, until he shows up and mocks her for it. Meanwhile, being trapped in the dummy, she trips in the powder that he uses for the body swap, and Cyrus grabs her and runs off. We cut back to him tormenting her, revealing the powder on his hand, but when he goes in, Erma snaps. She goes for the kill, but stops, remembering all the time they spent together, and then drops him in the lake. Selena finally drags the doll over to her and tries to warn her, but it's too late, as he grabs the back of her head. And then it dawns on him that the water washed away all the powder. While he was panicking, she jumps on him, still covered in it, and regaining control of her body. Back as the dummy, he tries to move in, but Erma catches him in midair, and then sets him on fire. He laughs, revealing that in this form he can't die. Many have tried to kill me. I have been stabbed, burned, drowned, and even a few times through a wood chipper. I cannot die. So they chain him to a boulder and drop him down a pit, landing in hell, which then raises a few more questions of what in this world actually exists. I know we have the yokai later, but does technically everything exist in this world? Anyway, back to our group. When they get back home, she tries her best to calm her down, and saying it's okay to like girly stuff. You just don't shut yourself off from everyone else. And even offers to watch it with her, only for it to turn out to be a hyper-action medieval fantasy. She looks at it, and back at the doll, talk about false advertising. And that's the end of the first real story arc. While having a lot of great moments, it still wasn't the part that solidified it for me as what we know today. But this was what originally hooked me, having to come to terms with being half human and half Onryu, and neither side defining who you are. When I first read the story 2 years ago, if I would have stopped before this, I might have just thought that this was a cute little parody comic, and wouldn't have paid it much mind. But after you've reached this point in the comic, you're not going to be putting it down anytime soon. Anyway, back to the filler. We get a good one referencing Lights Out, revealing it to be a game of red light, green light, followed by a cute one of her sleep floating, freaking out several people before Emiko finds her. And then another one with a friend showing her a Rubik's Cube which she solves. They ask her how she's practiced so much, flashing back to her solving the Lament configuration, aka the Hellraiser puzzle box. And the final one worth talking about was her trying on different Halloween costumes, before changing back, and someone commenting on how great she looks. Confused, she turns to her friend, and kinda gets this just go with it attitude. But now it's time for the second story arc, The Rats in the School Walls, which again stretched into a 35-part series, most of them being double-paged. We start off with one showing up at the cafeteria and stealing a sandwich. Then the group asks her if she could stop him, but it's too fast for a normal method. Mad, she grabs all the cutlery and launches it at him, almost hitting their teacher. The place becomes a mess, before Amy points out, "Can't you just levitate the rat?" The teacher sends him to the principal's office, but it spits at her and she knocks it away, beaming her right in the face. Needless to say, the group gets detention, and we're introduced to Sydney, the hall monitor, who's more like a drill sergeant. While there, they hear something in the wall, Erma then phases through it in the most scarring way possible, foreseeing something and then pursuing. The group slips out and follows a string of rats to a hole in the supply closet, and sees a giant footstep, followed by Erma. Sydney finds them and the hole, blaming them for it and sending them back to detention. Erma loses her target and then heads back there as well, but hears voices coming from the bathroom, and sees her talking to herself in the mirror, figuring out that she knows more than she's letting on. They decide to come back that night to investigate. They grab what supplies they have, as well as revealing that one of her friends is the little brother of her first babysitter. Again, this plot point has gone nowhere as of yet. Erma brought a spellbook that can turn them invisible for a short amount of time. The group heads in before running into the principal, Wes, and Sydney, and they follow the pair into the crawl space and down a trapdoor, revealing how the thing escaped earlier. They go down some tunnels until arriving at a city populated by rat people. Well, they never come out and say it, but they remind me a lot of kobolds from German folklore. Normally humanoid versions of rats or other small creatures like lizards. Anyway, back to the story, as the leader addresses him as his old friend, revealing that the influx of the rat problem is due to Sydney, also revealing him as her dad. The rats argue ideology as the invisibility wears off. Wes interjects about the inevitability of the two races crossing paths, revealing the students that tailed them. One of them attacks, but Erma sends him flying. Then Sydney steps in, controlling a wave of rats, as we finally get to see her powers get put to the test. Floating above them all at full tilt, the principal sighs and tells them both to knock it off. No one is hurt, just calm down. He gets called out for letting them follow him, and then he reveals his plan, introducing them to Erma, a ghost with human friends. The world has changed a lot over the years, and then the debate sparks back up, as Erma goes over to Sydney, asking her what's up. She tells him that the tribe has lived there since before the town was built, and then one day Wes and a small group found them, and that's where he met her mother. But she didn't make it out of childbirth. Her ability to communicate with the rats came from her, and she wanted one day for both races to live in peace. But she still has to hide her true self. Her father, overhearing this, asking her to stop, but again Wes intervenes, saying, shouldn't the choice be left up to her? She thinks for a moment, and then reveals that she's a hybrid. Her father sighs and says, look at them. They're shocked, frightened even. But again, Wes adds, wait for it. Sydney says that it's hard for her to keep the human form on all the time, and Erma gives her a hug, and the others are in awe. Other than her being wretchedly adorable, they don't see this as an abnormality, but something more like a superpower. It was this moment that made the show something more than just a fun little parody. The heart behind it all. So, they take him up on his offer, and let any others who want to join them at the school do so. Sydney's still trying to adjust to everything, but Erma totally geeks out about her also loving ponies. And that's a good stopping point for today's episode. Again, the next major story arc hasn't ended as I'm making this video, but we can still do the setup and the first part of it. Again, if you missed our first look at the opening part of the series, or the spin-off Spirits Bloom, then I'll put both those links in the inslate. And we're still doing our month of videos, for better or for worse. So feel free to add your own ideas down to the comments below, on anything that you'd like to see get made into a video. But again, that about wraps it up. Anyway, I'm Runia.
And I'm Ada.
Invite you to join us again for the next night.
Weep not for children, for life is this way, murdering beauty and passion. Hush now, dear children, it must be this way, to weary of life and deceptions. Rest now, my children.